The howl pierced the night, freezing my blood mid-pulse. It wasn't a normal wolf, not even close. The sound resonated with something ancient and malevolent, a primal call that awakened terror in the deepest recesses of my mind. I dropped my flashlight. The beam spiraled across the forest floor before settling on a patch of disturbed earth. Fresh claw marks tearing through the Tennessee soil like it was tissue paper. 10 inches deep, 8 inches wide. No natural animal makes marks like that. My camping trip had just become a nightmare. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up 6 hours, though it feels like a lifetime ago now. My name is Samuel, and I came to the Appalachian wilderness to escape. My divorce finalized last month. The startup I poured 5 years into collapsed, and my therapist suggested reconnecting with nature might help my depression. So I drove 8 hours from Nashville to this remote corner of the Cherokee National Forest, a place so isolated my cell phone hadn't shown a signal bar since I turned off the main highway. I found the perfect spot near dusk, a small clearing beside a creek, sheltered by ancient oaks. As I set up my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, just the whisper of wind through leaves and the occasional snap of a twig that sent my heart racing. That should have been my first warning. The second came when I tried to light my campfire. The flames caught, then twisted in impossible directions, as if repelled by something invisible. The fire eventually took, but burned with an odd bluish tinge at its edges. I dismissed it all, the silence, the fire, the goosebumps on my arms, as city boy paranoia. 5 years behind a computer had made me forget what real wilderness felt like. I heated my dinner, sipped from my flask of whiskey, and watched the stars emerge overhead, brilliant and cold in the vast darkness. That's when I heard the scream, human but not quite. A shriek that started as a woman's cry for help but twisted halfway through into something guttural and animalistic. It came from deeper in the forest, maybe half a mile away. "Hello," I called out, my voice embarrassingly thin in the darkness. "Do you need help?" Silence answered. Common sense told me to stay put. These woods were treacherous at night, sinkholes, cliffs, and tangled undergrowth that could break an ankle with one wrong step. But what if someone was hurt? The scream had sounded so desperate. I grabbed my flashlight and hunting knife, not that I'd ever used it for more than whittling and opening packages, and headed in the direction of the cry. The forest closed around me immediately. Branches reached like gnarled fingers, scratching my face and catching my clothes. The ground was a chaotic maze of roots and rocks, forcing me to move slowly despite my growing sense of urgency. "Hello," I called again, stronger this time. "I'm here to help." A rustle to my left. I swung my flashlight toward it, catching a glimpse of movement, too fast to identify, too large to be comfortable with. The beam illuminated a patch of leaves, disturbed and spattered with something dark and wet. I approached cautiously, my boots crunching on the forest debris. The wet patches glistened in my flashlight beam. Blood, fresh and still warm when I reluctantly touched it. My rational mind began constructing explanations. An injured animal, a hunter's recent kill. But my instincts were screaming a different story, one written in the primal language of fear. Whatever made those bloodstains wasn't far away. I should have turned back, should have returned to my campsite, packed up and hiked out, darkness be damned. It's the decision that haunts me now. The moment I chose curiosity over caution. Instead, I continued forward, following the sporadic blood drops like some macabre trail of breadcrumbs. They led me to a small clearing where the trees parted enough to allow moonlight to filter down in silver shafts. In the center lay a backpack, torn open, its contents scattered. Nearby, a hiking boot, just one, lay on its side. The blood trail continued to the far edge of the clearing, where the underbrush had been violently pushed aside, as if something had been dragged away. I approached the backpack, my flashlight beam jittering with my trembling hand. The ID inside belonged to a Mark Davidson from Knoxville. Credit cards, cash, and a half-empty water bottle remained. This wasn't a robbery. The ripping sound came without warning, an explosion of movement from the brush to my right. I spun, knife raised in pathetic defense, as branches and leaves parted. A deer burst into the clearing, eyes wide with panic. It startled me so badly I fell backward, landing hard on the forest floor. The deer paid me no mind, bounding across the clearing and disappearing into the darkness on the other side. I laughed nervously, my heart hammering against my ribs. Just a frightened deer. I pushed myself up, brushing dirt from my pants, when I noticed what had spooked the animal. 20 yards away at the edge of my flashlight's reach stood a figure, human in shape but wrong somehow. The proportions distorted, the posture unnaturally hunched. It remained just beyond where my light could clearly define it, a shadow among shadows. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Mark? Is that you? Are you hurt?" The figure didn't respond. It shifted slightly and I caught a glimpse of eyes reflecting my flashlight. Not the dull red of a deer or raccoon, but a sulfurous yellow-green that seemed to generate their own light. "I'm going to come closer to help you," I said, though every instinct told me to run. "Are you injured?" A low growl rumbled across the clearing, raising the hair on my arms and neck. No human made that sound. I took an involuntary step backward. The figure moved then, not forward as I feared, but sideways, circling the perimeter of the clearing, always keeping to the shadows. I turned with it, knife extended, flashlight beam desperately trying to illuminate what my mind was refusing to fully process. It moved wrong, like its joints worked in different directions than they should, bones shifting beneath skin in impossible configurations. "Stay back," I warned, voice steadier than I felt. "I'm armed." The laugh that answered me will echo in my nightmares forever, starting as a man's chuckle but deteriorating into something between a growl and a hyena's cackle. "Little blade," a voice rasped, so rough and distorted I barely recognized it as speech. "Little man." My muscles locked in primal fear. It spoke. Whatever this thing was, it spoke. In the moment I froze, it moved. 1 second at the edge of the clearing, the next rushing toward me with impossible speed. My flashlight finally caught it full on, and my mind recoiled from what I saw. It had been human once. The tattered remains of clothing still clung to parts of its body, but the face had elongated into a canine muzzle. Lips pulled back to reveal yellowed fangs that no wolf or dog could match. The hands extending from the flannel shirt sleeves ended in curved black claws, already dark with dried blood. Its eyes, though, God, its eyes were the worst. Human awareness looked out from those glowing orbs, an intelligence that had no place in something so bestial. I swung my knife in a wild arc as the creature closed the distance. By sheer luck, the blade connected, opening a shallow cut across its chest. The thing howled, part pain, part rage, and swiped at me with those terrible claws. I felt fire across my ribs as its talons shredded my jacket and the skin beneath. The force of the blow sent me spinning to the ground, my knife flying from my grasp, disappearing into the underbrush. The creature loomed over me, saliva dripping from its jaws onto my face. Its breath smelled of rotting meat and something metallic. Blood, I realized with horror. It sniffed at my wound, making a sound almost like satisfaction. "You run," it growled, voice thick around too many teeth. "You run now." It stepped back, giving me space. I didn't understand until I saw the gleam in those intelligent eyes. This wasn't mercy. It wanted to hunt. Terror gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I scrambled to my feet and ran, abandoning my flashlight in the process. The forest closed around me, branches whipping my face, roots threatening to trip me with every desperate stride. Behind me, I heard the creature's howl of excitement, followed by the crash of underbrush as it began its pursuit. I ran blindly, the quarter moon providing just enough light to avoid slamming into trees. My only thought was distance, putting as much of it as possible between myself and the monster. Logic told me I couldn't outrun it, not in its territory, not with its speed. My only hope was to find shelter, something defensible. The forest floor suddenly disappeared beneath my feet. I plunged down a steep embankment, tumbling through brush and over rocks, pain exploding through my shoulder as I collided with a tree trunk. I came to rest at the bottom of a ravine, the breath knocked from my lungs. Silence from above. Had I lost it? I forced myself to remain still despite the pain shooting through my body, listening intently over the pounding of my heart. A twig snapped on the ridge. "I smell your fear," the voice called, closer than I'd hoped. Sweet, like summer berries. I looked around frantically, searching for escape or shelter. The ravine continued in both directions, carved by what had once been a creek but was now just a trickle of water over smooth stones. To my right, perhaps 50 yards away, the ravine wall had partially collapsed, creating what looked like a small cave or overhang. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept toward it, freezing whenever debris shifted under my feet. The thing above seemed to be pacing along the ridge, enjoying my terror, prolonging the hunt. "Not the first to enter my woods," it called conversationally, its voice drifting along the ravine. Others thought themselves hunters too, with guns, with traps. A chilling laugh. Still they died. Still they fed me. I reached the overhang, a shallow depression where erosion had carved out the softer soil beneath a shelf of rock. Not a true cave, but better than nothing. I pressed myself into the darkest recess, trying to control my ragged breathing. "Generations, I've hunted these mountains," the creature continued, its voice moving down the ravine in my direction. "The Cherokee knew. They left offerings, respected me." A snarl entered its voice. "Not like now. Now they build, they cut, they come with their tents and their noise." My hand pressed against the back wall of my small shelter, encountering something smooth and round. I nearly cried out when I realized what it was. A human skull, its surface weathered and brown with age. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw more bones scattered around me, a rib cage, femurs, smaller bones I couldn't identify. This wasn't a shelter, it was a larder. "Found my pantry, have you?" The voice came from directly above now. I looked up to see its silhouette against the night sky, perched on the rock shelf over my hiding place. Convenient place to store what I don't finish in one feeding. It jumped down, landing with inhuman grace just feet from the overhang entrance. In the dim moonlight, I could see it more clearly now. The transformation was incomplete. Parts of it still resembled the man it had once been, while others had twisted into something lupine and monstrous. Its shoulders and chest had broadened, ripping through the flannel shirt, while coarse hair, not quite fur, covered its exposed skin in patches. "What are you?" I whispered, the question escaping before I could stop myself. The creature cocked its head, an almost contemplative gesture. "Old," it replied. "Older than the roads, older than the towns." It stepped closer, ducking its head to peer into my hiding place. "Men have many names for my kind. Wendigo, Rougarou," its muzzle pulled back in what might have been a smile. "Werewolf is what most call me now. Simple, understandable." It reached into the overhang, claws scraping the stone inches from my face. "Once a man like you," it continued, "trapper 2 centuries ago, starving winter, ate what I could find." Something like regret crossed its inhuman features. "Should have died, instead, changed." Its claws closed around my ankle before I could process its movement. With horrifying strength, it dragged me from my hiding place, my fingers leaving bloody streaks on the stone as I desperately tried to find purchase. I found myself dangling upside down, the creature having lifted me with one hand to examine me in the moonlight. "You're hurt," it observed, sniffing at the claw wounds on my side. "Bleeding." It ran a clawed finger through the blood and brought it to its mouth, tasting. Fear makes the meat tender. In desperation, I reached for the hunting knife on my belt, my backup smaller than the one I'd lost, but better than nothing. The creature was too focused on savoring my blood to notice until I plunged the blade into its thigh. It howled in pain and dropped me. I hit the ground hard but scrambled immediately to my feet, knife still in hand. The werewolf clutched its bleeding leg, yellow eyes blazing with fury. "Enough play!" it roared, its voice losing all human quality. I didn't wait for it to recover. I bolted down the ravine, pushing my body beyond what I thought possible. The thing's enraged howls echoed behind me, followed by the sound of pursuit. Not the careful stalking of before, but a crashing, furious chase. The ravine curved sharply, and as I rounded the bend, I saw salvation. A cabin perched on the slope above the ravine. Light glowed from its windows, warm and impossibly hopeful in the darkness. "Help!" I screamed, changing direction to scramble up the steep slope toward the structure. "Please help me!" Behind me, the werewolf's howl changed tone. There was concern in it now, perhaps even fear. The sight of the cabin had disrupted its hunt. I clawed my way up the incline, roots and rocks cutting my hands as I pulled myself higher. The cabin was maybe 50 yards away now, its porch light a beacon of safety. Something seized my leg, claws digging deep. I screamed as the werewolf dragged me back down several feet before I managed to kick free, leaving a chunk of my pant leg and possibly flesh in its grasp. "No escape," it growled, though I detected uncertainty in its voice. "My territory." "Help!" I screamed again, louder, my voice breaking with desperation. A miracle happened. The cabin door opened, spilling more light into the darkness. A silhouette appeared on the porch, someone holding what looked like a rifle. "Who's out there?" a man's voice called. The werewolf froze, growling deep in its throat. Its eyes darted between me and the cabin, calculating. "Please," I gasped, too quiet for the cabin owner to hear from this distance. But the werewolf heard me. "Don't let it take me." Something shifted in the creature's eyes. Not compassion, but a cold pragmatism. With startling swiftness, it leapt away, disappearing into the shadows of the ravine. I didn't question my reprieve. I scrambled the rest of the way up the slope, half crawling by the time I reached level ground. The cabin owner had moved to the edge of his porch, rifle raised, peering into the darkness. Stay there," I managed to call. "I'm hurt. There's something in the woods." "Christ almighty," the man muttered as I staggered into the pool of light cast by the porch. "What happened to you, son?" I collapsed at the foot of his porch steps, strength finally deserting me. The man hurried down, rifle still in one hand. He was older, maybe 60, with a grizzled beard and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. "Something attacked me," I gasped as he helped me to my feet. "In the woods. Not a normal animal. Please, we need to get inside." The man's eyes narrowed, taking in my torn clothing, the blood, the raw terror in my expression. He nodded once and helped me up the steps. "Name's Earl," he said as he ushered me through the door. "Been expecting something like this?" The interior of the cabin was sparse but neat, a main room combining kitchen and living areas, with what looked like 2 doors leading to smaller rooms. A fire burned in a stone hearth, casting flickering light over rough-hewn furniture. What caught my attention, however, were the protections. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters. Symbols were carved into the door frames and window sills. Most tellingly, a line of what appeared to be salt and other substances traced a complete circle around the interior perimeter of the cabin. Earl locked the heavy wooden door behind us and slid a substantial beam into metal brackets, barring it. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a chair near the fire. "Let me look at those wounds." I lowered myself gingerly into the chair, while Earl retrieved a first aid kit from a cabinet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shaking and nauseous as pain claimed its due. "You saw it," Earl said. It wasn't a question. He knelt beside me and carefully cut away the tattered remains of my shirt to expose the claw marks on my ribs. "What is it?" I asked, wincing, as he began cleaning the wounds with antiseptic. It talked. It said it was, a werewolf. Earl's hands stilled momentarily before continuing their work. "Been up these mountains my whole life," he said quietly. "My daddy before me, and his daddy before him. Stories about it go back to when the first European trappers came through these parts." He applied butterfly bandages to the deeper cuts. "Cherokee called it Aniskina, the evil spirit that makes you desire human flesh." "It said it was a man once," I said, the memory making me shudder. "A trapper who starved and changed." Earl nodded grimly. "That tracks with some of the stories. Winter of 1823 was brutal in these mountains. Records talk about a trapper named Matthias Corbin, who was found half dead in early spring. Claimed he'd survived by hunting, but folks noticed game was plentiful that season. No need for a skilled trapper to near starve." He met my eyes. "Less than a month later, the disappearances started. My blood ran cold. Disappearances? Hunters, travelers, anyone who ventured too deep into certain parts of the forest. Earl finished bandaging my side and moved to examine the wounds on my leg. Every few years, the pattern repeats. Authorities blame bears, mountain lions, exposure. Easier than admitting what's really out there. You believe it, I said. You were ready for it. This cabin, the herbs, the symbols. Earl's expression hardened. Lost my brother to it in '82. Went hunting, never came back. Search party found pieces of him. He swallowed hard. I've spent 40 years learning how to fight it. Killed it twice. Killed it? Then how? It comes back, Earl interrupted. Not right away. Sometimes takes years, but it always returns. He finished bandaging my leg and stood, moving to a chest in the corner of the room. My theory is it's tied to the land somehow. Kill the body and eventually it finds a new host. Someone who wanders too far into its territory. Someone vulnerable. He opened the chest and removed several items. Bundles of dried plants, small cloth bags of what might have been powder or salt, and most prominently, a revolver with unusual markings etched into its barrel. Silver bullet, I asked, surprising myself with a weak laugh. Earl didn't smile. Silver, yes, blessed by 3 different faiths. Bullets cast at midnight during a full moon. He checked the cylinder. I don't take chances. A howl split the night outside, much closer than I'd expected. I nearly fell from my chair in panic. It's testing the boundaries, Earl said calmly, though I noted how his hand tightened on the revolver. Trying to decide if it can get to you. Can it? I asked, eyeing the protections around the cabin with new desperation. Not easily, but it's persistent and smart. Earl moved to the window, peering cautiously through a narrow gap in the curtains. Too smart. It learns, adapts. Each time it comes back, it remembers more from its human life. Another howl, this one from the opposite side of the cabin. The creature was circling us. We should call for help, I suggested. Earl gave me a pitying look. Phone lines don't reach here. Nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. Radio might work, but backup wouldn't arrive till morning. He shook his head. By then, it would be gone, leaving nothing but questions without answers. A heavy thud shook the cabin. Something had leapt onto the roof. Dust and dried herbs drifted down from the rafters as heavy footsteps moved across the cedar shingles. I came up here to get away, I said, the irony of my therapist's advice hitting me full force. Clear my head, reconnect with nature. I laughed bitterly. I didn't even tell anyone exactly where I was going. That's how it likes it, Earl said grimly. Isolated, alone, no witnesses. He handed me one of the cloth bags. Carry this. Mixture of herbs and blessed salt. Won't kill it, but might slow it down if it gets close. If, I questioned, clutching the protective bag tightly. Earl didn't answer, his attention focused on the ceiling as the footsteps stopped directly above us. We both held our breath, listening. Give him to me, the werewolf's voice called down, muffled but audible through the roof. Not your fight, old man. You know I can't do that, beast, Earl replied evenly. A growling laugh seeped through the ceiling boards. Still bitter, Earl? After all these years, your brother tasted sweet, like maple sugar. Earl's face flushed with anger, but his voice remained steady. You won't find a way in. Not tonight. Every fortress has a weakness. The roof creaked as the creature moved again. Remember Eleanor? Spring of '91? She thought her little cabin was safe too. I saw Earl flinch, pain crossing his weathered features. Who was Eleanor? I asked quietly. My wife, Earl replied, voice tight. It took her while I was checking our property after a storm. Broke through a window I'd failed to properly protect. The footsteps moved to the edge of the roof, and a moment later, a heavy thud suggested the creature had jumped down to the porch. Scratching sounds came from the door, not an attempt to break in, but almost contemplative, like someone tracing patterns with their fingernail. I can wait, the werewolf called, its voice clearer now. Sunrise is hours away, so many little cracks to explore. Earl moved purposefully around the cabin, checking windows, inspecting the protective lines on the floor, ensuring nothing was out of place. I watched helpless as he moved a cast iron pot of water onto the wood stove and added several of the herb bundles. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Preparing," he answered simply. "The steam will strengthen the protections, make it harder for it to focus." He stirred the pot, releasing a pungent aroma, sage, I thought, and something metallic. Might disorient it enough to give us an advantage. An advantage for what? "You said we're safe in here." Earl's expression was grim. "Safe until we're not. If the creature can't get in, it might try to draw us out." He added more herbs to the pot. "Or wait us out. I have supplies for a few days, but eventually, we'd have to leave," I finished, understanding dawning. "So what's the plan?" Before Earl could answer, a new sound interrupted. Glass shattering in one of the back rooms. Earl cursed and grabbed his revolver. "Stay behind the salt line," he ordered as he moved quickly toward one of the doors. "Whatever happens, don't break the circle." He disappeared into what I assumed was a bedroom. Seconds later, I heard him curse again. "Smart bastard," he called back to me. "Broke the window but didn't enter, testing how quickly I'd respond." More glass shattered. The other room this time. Earl emerged and moved swiftly to the second door, revolver raised. I remained frozen in my chair, the protective bag clutched in a white-knuckled grip, straining to hear over the thundering of my heart. Earl returned, face grim. "Same thing. It's trying to divide my attention, make me waste ammunition, shooting at shadows." A new sound drew our attention to the chimney. Scratching, followed by cascading soot. Something was trying to come down the flue. Earl moved to the fireplace and thrust a burning branch from the fire upward into the chimney. A pained snarl echoed down the stone passage, followed by the scrabble of claws retreating upward. "It's getting desperate," Earl observed, returning the branch to the fire. "Good. Desperate creatures make mistakes." The cabin fell silent. No footsteps, no scratching, no taunting voice. The sudden absence of the werewolf was somehow more terrifying than its presence had been. "Where did it go?" I whispered. Earl shook his head, moving cautiously from window to window, peering out into the darkness. "Could be anywhere. Waiting. Planning." Minutes stretched into an hour of tense silence. The herbal steam filled the cabin, making my eyes water and my head slightly foggy. But Earl seemed unaffected, maintaining his vigilant patrol of the windows. "We can't just wait," I said finally. "You said yourself, eventually we'll have to leave." Earl stopped his pacing and regarded me thoughtfully. "You're right, and it knows that." He returned to the chest in the corner and withdrew a leather-bound book. There might be another option. He brought the book to the table and opened it carefully, revealing pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, and pressed plant specimens. "My research," he explained. "Everything I've learned about the creature over the years. How to fight it, how to kill it." He turned several pages. "And how to trap it." "Trap it?" I moved closer, examining the intricate diagram on the page, a circle with elaborate symbols arrayed around it. Reminiscent of the protection line that surrounded us now, but far more complex. The Cherokee believed the creature was bound to these mountains by powerful medicine. That's why it never leaves, even when hunting would be easier elsewhere. Earl traced a symbol on the page. If we can reinforce that binding, we might be able to contain it more permanently than just killing its current form. "How do we do that?" Earl's expression was grave. "We'd need to draw it into a binding circle, perform the ritual while keeping it contained." He closed the book. It would require perfect timing and bait. I understood immediately what he was suggesting. "You want to use me as bait?" "Not if there's another way," Earl said, though his tone suggested he didn't see alternatives. "But you're already marked by it. It has your scent, your blood. The connection would strengthen the binding." Outside, a wolf howled. A natural wolf, its voice lacking the unnatural qualities of the werewolf's call. Another answered, then another. Earl frowned. "That's odd. Wolves don't usually venture this close to my cabin." A horrifying thought struck me. Unless something drew them here. As if confirming my suspicion, the werewolf's voice called from somewhere in the darkness. "Found some cousins, Earl." distant relations, simple minds, easily persuaded. More howls sounded, closer now, surrounding the cabin. "It's controlling them," Earl muttered, moving quickly to reinforce the protective herbs at each window. Never seen it do that before. "Learning," I remembered his words. "Adapting." A wolf slammed against one of the windows, its powerful body cracking the glass. Another hit the door, while others began scratching at the cabin walls. "The circle will keep them out too," Earl assured me, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Natural wolves can't cross blessed boundaries." "But they can damage the cabin," I pointed out as another wolf hit a window, widening the crack. "Create openings for the werewolf to exploit." Earl's jaw tightened. "We need to move up our timeline." He returned to the chest and began removing items with greater urgency. Chalk, small bottles of liquid, a silver dagger. "We'll need to create the binding circle here now and then draw it in." "How? If we can't leave and it can't enter?" "We make it want to enter badly enough to challenge the protections," Earl interrupted. He handed me the chalk. "Start drawing this on the floor." He opened the book to the diagram. "Exactly as shown. I'll prepare the rest." I began marking the wooden planks with the intricate pattern, while Earl mixed liquids from various bottles into a small copper bowl. Outside, the wolves continued their assault on the cabin, the cracks in one window now spreading like a spider's web across the glass. "The binding requires blood," Earl explained as he worked, "freely given from someone the creature has marked." He glanced at my bandaged wounds. "Your blood will create the connection." "And then what?" I asked, trying to keep my hand steady as I drew the complex symbols. "Then I complete the incantation. If it works, the creature will be bound within the circle indefinitely, unable to harm anyone else." He studied my progress. "Wider arc on that sigil. It needs to connect with the outer ring." I corrected the symbol, trying to ignore the increasingly violent impacts against the cabin exterior. "And if it doesn't work?" Earl checked the load in his revolver again. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way. We fight." The largest window shattered inward as a wolf finally broke through, landing amid a shower of glass on the cabin floor, just outside our protective salt circle. The animal's eyes gleamed unnaturally in the firelight, its behavior wrong, too focused, too controlled. Earl fired without hesitation. The wolf collapsed, but behind it, more shadows moved in the darkness beyond the broken window. "Faster!" Earl urged as two more wolves leapt through the opening. He shot one, but the other evaded him, circling the cabin's perimeter, searching for weaknesses in our defense. I completed the binding circle just as the surviving wolf found the place where Earl had stepped over the salt line to retrieve the book. The barrier was slightly disturbed there, not broken, but thinned. The wolf charged, hitting the weakened point with its full weight. The salt scattered, creating a gap in our protection. The animal yelped as if burned when it touched the line, but the damage was done. Our circle was broken. Earl shot the wolf, then dropped to his knees, desperately trying to repair the salt line. "The vial in my pocket," he shouted. "Quick!" I pulled a small glass bottle from his jacket. Inside was a white powder that glittered strangely in the firelight. "Pour it over the break," Earl instructed, still working to gather the scattered salt. I uncorked the vial and shook the powder over the broken section of our protective circle. It sizzled where it fell, releasing a sharp ozone scent. Too late. From the darkness beyond the broken window, the werewolf's voice called, "Thank you for the invitation." It stepped through the opening, entering the cabin with deliberate slowness, savoring our fear. In the full light of the fire, I could see the creature clearly for the first time. The transformation seemed more complete now, its body hunched but powerful, covered in patchy gray-brown fur. Its face was a nightmare hybrid of human and wolf features, the muzzle elongated and filled with jagged teeth. But the eyes, those terrible yellow eyes, remained dreadfully intelligent. Shreds of flannel and denim still clung to its massive frame, a grotesque reminder of the human it had once been. Blood, both fresh and dried, matted the fur around its mouth and claws. Earl raised his revolver but hesitated, his eyes flickering to the binding circle I'd drawn. The werewolf stood just steps away from it. "Silver burns," the creature growled, eyeing the weapon. "But not enough to stop me, old man. You've proven that before. This ends tonight, Earl replied, his voice steady despite our dire situation. One way or another, the werewolf laughed, the sound chilling in its almost human quality. Always so dramatic, Earl. You could have left these mountains decades ago, found peace elsewhere. It stepped further into the cabin, claws clicking on the wooden floor. Instead, you've spent your life in fear and obsession. Was it worth it? Every minute, Earl answered without hesitation. If it kept others safe from you? The werewolf's eyes narrowed. Noble, futile, but noble. Its gaze shifted to me. And you, Samuel? Yes, I heard Earl call your name. What brought you to my hunting grounds? Seeking adventure? Escaping some human tragedy? It inhaled deeply. I smell old grief on you, recent pain. I found my voice, though it trembled. How do you know my name? I've been hunting these woods for 2 centuries, it replied, almost conversationally. You learn to gather information. The ID in your wallet, your panicked calls to your friend here. It gestured toward Earl. Humans are noisy, even when they think they're being quiet. Earl made a subtle hand gesture, drawing my attention to the binding circle. He wanted me to move toward it, to position myself so the werewolf would follow. You're right, I said, taking a careful step backward, closer to the circle. I came here to escape. Divorce, failed business, thought nature might help clear my head. The werewolf followed my movement, taking another step into the cabin, its massive form casting long shadows in the firelight. Its claws left gouges in the wooden floor as it stalked forward. Nature, it said, the word twisted by its inhuman mouth. Humans speak of nature as something separate from themselves, something peaceful. Another step toward me. Nature is tooth and claw, Samuel. It's hunger and survival. It's the strong devouring the weak. Its yellow eyes gleamed. I am the purest form of nature you'll ever encounter. Earl caught my eye again, nodding almost imperceptibly toward the silver dagger on the table. I understood his plan. We needed the creature in the center of the binding circle, and we needed my blood to complete the ritual. What happened to the man you were? I asked, taking another step back, closer to the circle. The trapper. Is he still in there somewhere? Something flickered across the werewolf's features. A moment of uncertainty, perhaps even pain. Fragments, it admitted. Dreams of a human life. Hunger, cold. Its voice lowered. The first time I tasted human flesh, I wept. The second time, it shrugged its massive shoulders. The man died. The beast remained. And now, I pressed, taking another step back, now standing at the edge of the binding circle. What are you now? The werewolf bared its teeth in a grotesque smile. Hungry? It lunged forward exactly as Earl had hoped, directly into the binding circle. I dove to the side as Earl shouted words in a language I didn't recognize, flinging the contents of the copper bowl toward the creature. The liquid sizzled where it struck the werewolf's fur, drawing an agonized howl. The dagger! Earl shouted, continuing his incantation. Your blood, quickly! I scrambled for the silver dagger, the werewolf thrashing within the circle, trying to break free but meeting some invisible barrier. The symbols I'd drawn began to glow with a faint blue light, pulsing in rhythm with Earl's chanting. The werewolf's rage was terrible to behold. It threw itself against the invisible boundary, each impact sending ripples of blue energy across the air. 2 centuries I've survived, it roared. You cannot cage me. I grabbed the dagger, its silver handle unnaturally cold against my palm. Earl's chanting grew more intense, the cabin filling with a static charge that made my hair stand on end. The binding circle's glow intensified, but I could see places where the light flickered and dimmed. The ritual was incomplete without my contribution. Your blood, Earl gasped between phrases, on the northernmost symbol. The werewolf's eyes locked on mine, burning with hatred and something else. Fear, perhaps the first true fear it had felt in centuries. He's using you, it growled, its voice suddenly softer, almost reasonable. Your blood, your life force, the ritual will drain you dry. He's sacrificing you to complete his vendetta. Earl didn't pause in his chanting, but his eyes met mine briefly, a silent plea to trust him. You're lying, I told the creature. though uncertainty flickered through me. "Am I?" the werewolf countered. "Ask yourself why he was so prepared. Why he's been waiting in these woods for decades." Its muzzle twisted into what might have been a sympathetic expression. "Some obsessions corrupt more thoroughly than any curse." I hesitated, the dagger trembling in my hand. The werewolf sensed my doubt and pressed its advantage. "I can offer you something he cannot," it said. "Power, freedom from human frailty. Join me willingly, and the change is different, controlled." Its voice dropped to an enticing whisper. "Imagine never being weak again, Samuel. Never being hurt or abandoned or ruined." For one terrible moment, the offer tempted me. After months of feeling powerless, watching my marriage disintegrate, my business collapse, the promise of strength called to something primal within me. Earl's chanting faltered as he saw my hesitation. "Samuel, don't listen," he gasped. "It's lying. It always lies." The werewolf's eyes glittered. "The choice is yours. Power and freedom with me, or death in this cabin, sacrificed for an old man's revenge." I looked at the dagger in my hand, then at Earl, his weathered face desperate but honest, and finally at the monster before me, beautiful and terrible in its predatory perfection. "My choice," I repeated, raising the dagger. "My choice is humanity." I drew the blade across my palm, pain flaring sharp and bright. Blood welled immediately, and I lunged forward, pressing my bleeding hand against the northernmost symbol in the binding circle. The effect was instantaneous. The circle erupted in blinding blue-white light, the symbols pulsing as if alive. My blood seemed to flow into the pattern itself, the wooden floor absorbing it like thirsty earth after drought. Earl's chanting reached a crescendo, his voice stronger than seemed possible for a man his age. The werewolf howled in rage and agony as the circle constricted, the glowing boundary pulling inward like a noose. It thrashed and clawed at the air, but the binding held. I felt a strange connection to the creature then, a pulling sensation, as if the ritual was drawing not just on my blood, but on something deeper, some essential part of my being that recognized a primal truth in the monster before me. "You could have been magnificent," the werewolf snarled, its voice distorting as the binding compressed it further. The cabin began to shake, items falling from shelves, windows rattling in their frames. The fire in the hearth twisted into impossible shapes, responding to the power being channeled through the ritual. Earl continued chanting, though blood now trickled from his nose with the effort. "Almost complete," he gasped during a brief pause. "Don't break the connection." I kept my bleeding hand pressed to the symbol, though my arm burned as if dipped in fire. The werewolf was fully encased now in a column of light, its form becoming indistinct within the blinding glow. With a final defiant roar, the creature lunged toward me, not physically, but something of its essence reached out, bypassing the binding to touch my mind directly. For one terrifying instant, I experienced its memories, centuries of hunting, the intoxicating freedom of primal existence, the bitter loneliness of immortality. The hunger, always the hunger. Earl shouted the final words of the ritual, and the light imploded with a thunderclap that threw us both backward. Darkness descended on the cabin, the fire extinguished, the only illumination coming from moonlight streaming through the broken window. In the center of the binding circle, where the werewolf had stood, remained only a small, dark object resting on the charred floorboards. Earl recovered first, lighting a kerosene lamp with shaking hands. In its gentle glow, he approached the circle cautiously, revolver still ready. "Is it done?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Earl knelt and examined the object without touching it, a crude pendant made of bone, carved with symbols similar to those in our binding circle. "The original binding," he murmured. "The Cherokee talisman that first trapped it in these mountains." He looked up at me, his face a mixture of wonder and exhaustion. "We didn't just bind it. We reversed its existence, returned it to its original prison. So it's over." I pressed my wounded hand against my shirt, trying to staunch the bleeding. Earl carefully picked up the pendant using a cloth, never allowing his skin to touch it directly. "For now, Perhaps forever, if this is properly secured. He wrapped the pendant completely and placed it in a small iron box from his supplies, which he then locked with a key that hung around his neck. "What will you do with it?" I asked as he treated my cut palm, applying antiseptic and bandages with practiced ease. "There's a Cherokee elder I trust. His ancestors were the ones who created the original binding." Earl finished bandaging my hand. "He'll know how to dispose of it properly. Some things are beyond European methods." Dawn was breaking by the time we'd cleaned up the cabin, burning the remains of the wolves, repairing what we could of the protective boundaries. My body ached with exhaustion and injury, but beneath the pain was profound relief. Earl insisted on escorting me back to my campsite to retrieve my belongings, both of us wary despite the morning light filtering through the trees. The forest seemed different now, ordinary, unthreatening, the birds singing their morning songs as if the previous night's horrors had been merely a bad dream. At my ravaged campsite, I found my backpack relatively untouched. As I gathered my scattered supplies, Earl remained vigilant, his revolver never far from his hand. "What you experienced is beyond what most people can comprehend," he said as I shouldered my pack. "When you return to civilization, to your normal life, it will start to seem unreal." "I won't forget," I assured him. Earl's weathered face softened slightly. "No, you won't, but you'll doubt. Your rational mind will begin creating alternative explanations. You were exhausted. You imagined things. I was a crazy old hermit who drugged you with his herbal concoctions." He sighed. "It's how the human mind protects itself. Is that why no one believes? Why authorities blame bears and mountain lions?" "Partly." Earl gazed into the forest. "It's also because the creature was careful. It picked isolated victims, left little evidence. The few who encountered it and survived either sounded insane when they told their stories or chose to remain silent." We walked back to the main trail in companionable silence. At the junction that would lead me back to civilization and cell phone reception, Earl stopped. "You should get those wounds properly treated," he said. "Tell them it was a bear attack. They'll believe that." I nodded, then hesitated. "Will I change?" It scratched me. "In the movies," Earl shook his head, "that's Hollywood nonsense. The curse wasn't transmitted through scratches or bites like some disease. It was something older, a bargain made with hunger and darkness." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're still fully human, Samuel." "What about you?" I asked. "Now that it's over, what will you do?" Earl looked back toward his cabin, barely visible through the trees. "Been asking myself that since Eleanor died. Vengeance kept me going for decades." A faint smile crossed his face. "Maybe it's time to rejoin the world. See what's changed while I've been playing hermit in these mountains." We shook hands and I felt an unexpected connection to this stranger who had saved my life, who had spent decades preparing for a night that finally came. "Thank you," I said simply. "Live well," he replied. "That's thanks enough." I hiked out that morning, reaching the main road by noon. A passing motorist gave me a ride to the nearest town. Their concerned questions about my battered appearance met with the agreed-upon bear attack story. At the local clinic, doctors treated my wounds properly, their professional faces betraying no suspicion at my explanation. By evening, I was in a motel room with decent cell reception, catching up on the messages and emails I'd missed during my wilderness therapy. My agent had news about potential investors interested in my next business venture. My therapist had left concerned messages about my sudden disappearance into the mountains. My ex-wife had even texted, a tentative olive branch suggesting coffee when I returned to Nashville. Life was pulling me back. Normal, understandable problems replacing the supernatural terror I'd survived. Earl had been right. Even just hours later, with my wounds freshly bandaged by skeptical doctors, I found myself questioning the reality of what I'd experienced. Had the creature's voice really been so articulate, or had my mind embellished those memories? Had Earl's ritual actually channeled some ancient power, or had we simply frightened away a large predator with fire and noise? But when I closed my eyes, I still saw those yellow, too intelligent eyes. Still heard that voice offering power and freedom from human weakness. Still felt the connection when my blood activated the binding circle. That moment of recognition between myself and something inhuman, yet disturbingly familiar. I checked out of the motel the next morning and began the drive back to Nashville. I had calls to make, meetings to schedule, a life to rebuild. The mountains of Tennessee receded in my rearview mirror, beautiful and secretive in the morning light. 2 weeks later, a small package arrived at my apartment. No return address, but inside was a carved wooden wolf and a note in cramped handwriting. The pendant is secure. The elder believes the binding will hold this time. I've decided to travel west for a while. Too many ghosts in these mountains. Be well, and remember, when the rational mind begins to doubt, trust your scars. They remember the truth. Earl. I placed the carving on my desk, a reminder not of the terror I'd survived, but of the choice I'd made in that cabin. When offered power without humanity, I chose to remain human, vulnerable, fallible, but connected to others in ways the creature could never understand. Sometimes at night, I dream of running through endless forests, powerful and free, the moon my only companion. I wake from these dreams sweating and disoriented, my hand throbbing where the silver dagger cut it. In those moments between dreaming and waking, I swear I can hear a distant, mournful howl. Not threatening, but almost envious. Then the moment passes, dawn comes, and I return to the world of humans. Older now, wiser, and always watchful when darkness falls.